I'm the storyteller, and my stories must be told. I have many stories, tales for both the young and old. I have many voices to describe many places. Many names have I, and many faces. In Russia I am Ivan, in Sweden I am Jan. In Germany I'm Johann, in America I'm John. From my many travels I have gathered these tales to teach you good sense when all else fails. Sometimes there are tears, sometimes there is laughter, but always are happily ever after.
Long ago and far away, in a land of lakes and forests, there lived in a tumble-down cottage a poor widow with her son Dominic. She earned just enough to keep them both by taking in laundry. It was hard work, and Dominic, who was a strong young man, was always happy to help his mother. So for a while, they were happy. But the widow knew that Dominic must go out into the world and earn his own living. And she also knew that he was much too naive. Living alone with her, he had learned nothing of the ways of the world. He believed everything that people told him, however tall the story. His mother had tried hard, but she could not instill any common sense into the lad. One day, she asked Dominic to collect the eggs from the henhouse. There was a fine clutch, enough to sell at the market. Because it was a hot day and she was very busy, she decided to let Dominic take the eggs to the market. She carefully explained to him exactly what to do and how to sell them. But remember, Dominic, the price is 5 coins. Don't take a penny less. Yes, Mother, said Dominic, and put on his jacket. With a cheerful wave of his hand, he set off to walk to market. It was a fine, sunny autumn day, and he whistled happily as he strolled down the track, thinking of all the things they would be able to buy with the money from the eggs. Well, he hadn't travelled very far when he saw a wagon approaching. It belonged to a gypsy family. When they saw the basket of eggs, they stopped and asked Dominic how much he wanted for them. 5 gold coins, not a penny less, said Dominic, remembering his mother's words. Oh, that's a lot for a basket of eggs, said the gypsy man. His wife was smiling at Dominic, who thought he had never in his life seen such a pretty face. He was quite mesmerized by her. I picked them this morning from the nest, said Dominic, still enchanted by her lovely smile. You couldn't get fresher eggs anywhere. Oh, well then, 5 coins it is. But unfortunately, I don't have any money on me today. Tell you what, I'll pay you tomorrow. Something was not quite right. Dominic couldn't think what. Oh, wait, he stammered. How do I know who you are? The gypsy smiled broadly. Why, that's easy. Just ask anyone for me. I'm myself. Oh, of course, laughed Dominic. Myself. See you tomorrow. Dominic walked behind the retreating wagon, hoping he had done the right thing. After all, he had sold all the eggs, and quickly, and for the right price. Why then did he still have the feeling that something was wrong? When he got home and his mother heard what had happened, she was furious. She chased Dominic all around the house with her broom. And the only way he managed to escape a severe beating was by climbing up the apple tree out of her reach. So at dawn the next morning, Dominic strode back towards the market in a frightful rage, determined to get his money from the gypsy who had cheated him. He grabbed everyone he met along the road, demanding to know if they knew the robber who was called myself. First he met a porter with some sacks of grain. Dominic shook him angrily. "Are you myself?" he demanded. "No, of course not," replied the indignant porter. Next, Dominic accosted two labourers carrying a sack of flour, but neither of them could help him. When he arrived at the market, he tried person after person. He could not find the man who had taken the eggs. Dominic became more and more annoyed. At last a man cried impatiently, "Myself could be anyone at all, even that fellow over there asleep in the sun." And sure enough, when Dominic shook the man awake and demanded to know who he was, the sleepy fellow replied, Why, I am myself." "Ah, myself at last. Give me my 5 coins." "Coins? What 5 coins?" The frightened man ended up by giving him his 5 coins without another word. Although the widow was very relieved to have the money, she realized more than ever before that her son would never learn the ways of the world by staying at home with her. It was high time he had a job. The very next day, she took him to the local innkeeper and asked the man to take Dominic on as an apprentice to learn all the crafts of innkeeping. The innkeeper looked Dominic up and down. "He looks a bit shabby," he said, "but I'll take him on and pay him 5 coins a month." The widow was overjoyed. Dominic decided to spend his first month's wages in advance. He and his mother went to market. They bought a new jacket and persuaded the stallholder to let him pay for it next month. Next, he insisted they buy some flowers for his mother. Then, he had his hair cut by the barber. Everyone congratulated Dominic on his new job. Everyone was quite happy to wait for payment. Even the passing pieman. The first task the innkeeper gave his new apprentice was to take a basket of newly caught fish down to the lake and clean them thoroughly, ready for lunch. "You clean them well, but don't dawdle around," said the innkeeper. "I'm a busy man and there's plenty more work for you to do." Happily, Dominic walked down to the lake, carrying the basket of glistening fish. It was a fine morning, and he thought with pride that at last he was learning a useful trade. He set to work with a will. He'd never had to clean fish before, but he found that he could do it quite easily. He was quite proud of himself. Soon all the fish were ready for the cook. But as he set off up the hill to the inn, he caught sight of a fishing boat setting out across the lake for the day. Because he was feeling so happy and because it was such a fine day, Dominic wanted to wish the fishermen well. He waved his arms at them and shouted, "A good day, my friends. I hope you get a good catch." He waved and danced about and cheered the departing fishermen. But from their boat, it looked as though Dominic was in some kind of difficulty and was signalling for help. They were in such a great hurry to start fishing, but they couldn't abandon someone in distress. So they turned their boat around and made as fast as possible to the shore to see what the matter was. When he found that Dominic was in fact perfectly all right, the fisherman was furious. Dominic hung his head in shame. It seemed that he could never do the right thing. But what should I have done?" he asked. "You should have just wished us Godspeed. That would have been enough." The angry fisherman replied, On his way back to the inn, Dominic saw a hunter stalking a cock pheasant in a nearby wood. He watched with interest as the man intently crept through the undergrowth, getting ever closer to his unsuspecting target. Then, just as the hunter was about to fire, Dominic cheerfully shouted, "A Godspeed," just as the fisherman had told him. Immediately, the bird took off in alarm. "You stupid boy," the hunter cried in a rage. "Your thoughtless words have frightened off my supper." "But I only wanted to wish you good luck," stammered the lad. "And that's what the fisherman told me to say." "All you had to do was whisper, 'May your aim be true,'" fumed the hunter. "Please remember that in future." Dominic quickly went on his way. As he reached the outskirts of town, Dominic saw a crowd which had gathered to watch some men fighting. Joining the edge of the crowd, Dominic called out, "May your aim be true," just as one man landed a punch on the nose of the other. The men at once forgot their quarrel, and all three turned on the hapless Dominic. He took to his heels and pelted through the town as fast as he could, trying to shake off his pursuers. But first he only managed to shake off the carefully cleaned fish that he'd been carrying. Without the extra burden, Dominic soon outpaced his pursuers, and he didn't stop until he reached the inn door. Empty-handed and very late, Dominic then had to face the furious landlord. He began to explain what had happened to him and the fish, but the landlord wasn't interested in his excuses. He chased him out of the inn with his stick at the ready, shouting, "You're fired!" after the retreating figure of his former apprentice. Poor Dominic. He had to go back to his mother without so much as a penny. He had no job and no money. All he had were debts. His irate creditors kept coming to the cottage demanding payment for the goods he had bought. His poor mother had to tell them he was out, while Dominic hid in the attic. thought it was quite a good way out of a difficult situation. But in his heart, he was ashamed. He tried to borrow some money from his mother, but she refused to pay any part of his debts. She told him that he had cost her enough already, and until he got another job, he would have to fend for himself. He tried to get another job, but everyone had already heard from the innkeeper how unreliable Dominic was. When he applied to the tailor for work, he flatly refused to take him on for any money at all. As for the fishermen, they knew for themselves how useless Dominic was. There was no way they were going to let him work for them. Dominic went home in despair. "Oh, what am I to do?" he said to himself. "I wish I was dead. At least then I wouldn't owe anyone any money." And that thought gave him a bright idea. He would be dead, or at least he would pretend to be. He knew he couldn't feel any worse dead than he did now. People might even be nice about him. Yes, he thought, it could even be fun. He lay on his bed, the candle between his hands, and closed his eyes. When his mother came to his room in search of him, she at first thought that he was just asleep. "Dominic," she called. But he didn't move. Dominic held his breath as she came closer. She was aghast to realize that her beloved only son was dead, obviously killed off by the strain of all his cares and woes. Getting to her feet in a hurry, she ran off to fetch the priest at once. Dominic half opened an eye as she left and smiled to himself. So far, so good. Weeping loudly in great distress, the widow ran to the priest's cell as fast as she could. She told him that her son had been killed by the persecution of his debtors. He did his best to console the poor woman. Dominic was placed on a bier. A surprising number of people came to the house to mourn, while the priest said the appropriate prayers. Then the funeral procession set off for the church. All the women tried to comfort his mother, and the mourners wept as they remembered what a delightful boy Dominic had been, as the solemn cortege wound its way through the village. "He bought 2 pairs of socks from me and never paid for them," sighed one shopkeeper, "and now he'll never be able to... Poor young lad, I forgive him his debt." "He lost all the fine fish he was supposed to wash," chimed in the innkeeper. "Poor boy, it was just high spirits. I forgive him now." "Well, I sold him the very jacket he's wearing now," cried a stallholder from the market. "I'm sure he meant it when he said that he would pay me soon. Oh, God knows I would have given it to him if I'd known that this would happen." Everyone had a story to tell about Dominic. But they all agreed that never had a mother a better son. Dominic was laid on his bier in front of the altar, ready for the next day's funeral service. Tenderly, his mother pulled the sheet over his face. At the dead of night, a band of robbers crept into the church. Dominic, hearing footsteps, peered out from under the shroud and hastily retired again, thinking hard. The robbers thought that they were safe from prying eyes and sat down to divide the spoils of a robbery amongst themselves. Each of them was so intent on making sure he received his fair share that no one even glanced at the bier. The thieves argued about what was whose. It was certainly no way to behave in a church. As he lay there and thought about it, Dominic became angrier and angrier. He would teach them a lesson, he decided. Still draped in the white sheet, slowly and deliberately, Dominic sat up in his coffin. "Who are these thieves that disturb the dead?" he shouted. The robbers thought he was a ghost. They were terrified. They yelled and ran for their lives, scrambling over each other in their haste to get to the door, loudly promising to lead honest lives from that day on. Dominic was left in sole possession of their hoard of coins and jewels. He couldn't believe his luck. When the priest came to the church next morning to prepare for the funeral service, he was astonished to find Dominic sitting up, miraculously restored to life, counting the robbers' fortune. That is how Dominic returned from the dead. He gave the coins and jewels back to their rightful owner, who was so pleased that he presented Dominic with a very generous reward. It was more than enough for Dominic to pay back all his debts and to keep himself and his mother in comfort. The whole village was very proud of him. Of course, the proudest and happiest of all was his mother.